Welcome to Module 2. I'm so excited to be back with you. So what I want to do here, just as a quick reminder, if you have any questions, if you need anything, don't forget, email me at batesf@henryk12.net. And then you also have my cell phone, so if you will just send me a text, that would be great. And I'll try to get back with you as quick as I can. Just another little reminder here about the discussions for each module. It is required that you respond to a class member's post, and video post and reply are an option, as well as written post. So please don't forget to respond to a class member's post in the discussion. All right, so the objectives, we want to work toward developing a common language for understanding and using data. We want to introduce the 8-step data-wise decision-making process, and then learn how to use multiple data sources to build a data-driven culture. So real quickly today in this module, we're going to look at a case study from the Franklin High School and the Clark Elementary School, which is located in Chapter 1 of your DataWise text. I also want to call your attention to how do principals really improve schools. It is by Richard DeFore and Mike Matos. I think it really will add some depth to your discussion. I'm not going to read it to you, but it is in the Module 1 folder in the resources. So leadership effects on students' learning occur largely because leadership strengthens professional community. Teachers' engagement in professional community, in turn, fosters the use of professional practices that are associated with student achievement. And that's from Lead and Learn. So while some of you may be working on your licensure to become an administrator, some of you may not, but regardless of what role you play in the school, you are still a leader. And you can be a teacher leader, an administrator, or some support type leader, like an instructional coach, PLC coach, those type of leadership roles. So everything you do does affect the student learning because of that professional community, because of that professional practice that's associated with student achievement. So we want to move on and not waste any time. So we do want to hit the nail on the head, right? The purpose of this course is to help us understand that data empowers teachers to design and implement change. So would that be any data? What data? You know, we do live in a time where we do have a data-rich environment in our schools. While we haven't had TCAP probably for this last year and this coming year, it's just going to be an exercise. Will be no accountability with it for EOCs or TCAP in Tennessee, more than likely. We can still glean a lot of things from a number of data sources. So just thinking, and I'll pause here, but I want you to think about what is the purpose of school. And I want you can pick any one of those objects, and then if your object isn't there, then you can create an object. But think about what is the purpose of school. So if you've got your object picked out, if we were in face-to-face class, I would obviously have you share out. I've heard some really good arguments made for any one of those clip art pictures that are there. But I think for me, it's probably, and I can make an argument between two of them, the eagle and then the candle, because if you're lighting a candle and then the light suddenly comes on, it's going to keep glowing. So as the purpose of school is to give us something where we can keep glowing and growing. So that's what it is for me. So I want you to, and I'm going to give you probably 2 or 3 minutes. I want you to look at the 6 words, and I want you to create 2 groups, and then we can talk about maybe what you chose, why you chose it, to yourself, because obviously you're watching this module, but I want you to think about it, and I'm going to give you like two minutes. After you kind of have had time to think about those words and put them in groups, then name each group. Okay, so there's lots of different ways for you to think about how to group these words. I've heard some folks say outgoing, incoming, but if you are speaking, writing, and showing, I've heard it said that those are things that are outgoing. They're products. Listening, viewing, and reading can be the intake. So you may have had a different arrangement, or you may have thought about these words differently, but it's all part of how we look at literacy and how we view literacy, data literacy, ELA literacy, math literacy, any content area literacy. But all those things are always occurring. We know that viewing and showing is just as important for a lot of students as speaking and listening. We usually pair writing and reading together because they are a reciprocal process. A good reader usually is a good writer. But a poor reader, it does affect their writing. Speaking and listening, we usually think about those as a reciprocal process, and then viewing and showing. So just a little something to get you thinking about why literacy is so important in every aspect. So here, if learning occurs in the brain and content is the desired learning, what is that bridge between the brain and what is the desired learning? How do we access? Yes, you guessed it, through literacy. So we do that through reading, listening, and viewing. And then we have that outcome of writing, speaking, and showing. So think about these images, since we're thinking about literacy. Um, there are 9 images, and just think about which one to you represents literacy. So again, if there's not a picture here that you can connect with, you can create your own. But this is real important. When I've done this with teachers, I've had some really good discussion about how they view literacy and what it means to them in the context of their content area. I think the most picked item from this array is the tree. It's got various things coming off of it. But this is personal. Literacy is a personal thing and personal to you. So whatever item you chose, that's perfectly great. Okay, so we take in information and we gain insight. Insight leads to intervention. Intervention can sometimes lead to an impact on whatever it is that we have gained the insight from. So I want you to think about school improvement in that context, because it's real important that we have that insight as we work toward creating an intervention. And I don't mean RTI, I mean an intervention for school improvement, which could be anything, which absolutely could include RTI, but what really does impact what is going on in your school. So here we're shooting for the stars. You can start out with a few ideas, try to harness those ideas, then they can move you into a direction where you can hit your targets. That is what school improvement should be about, is hitting those targets. And what in the world, what type of data do we use? In one of our texts that we have, What Matters, the author of that text developed this graphic. And it's those multiple layers of what types of measures do you use? Demographic data, which includes enrollment, attendance, dropout rate, ethnicity, gender, grade level. Then perceptional data is real important. It can be about the learning environment, about your values, your beliefs, your attitudes, your observations. And then school processes. What programs do you have in place, and what are the processes for using those programs? And then what is always used most, and it's where people always go to, and that is student testing information. So there's a number of things that she lists: standardized test, norm criterion reference test, teacher observations, and then formative assessments, which could mean benchmarking, or it could mean that a teacher's actual formative classroom assessment. So I want you to, if using, just student assessment data is something that you have looked at, and that is what has typically always been done, that's part of it. that's absolutely part of it. But there are more areas of data to pull from to help improve your school. Because remember, if the dropout rate is something that is a target for your high school, then It starts out with those little ideas, then how you filter those ideas to develop a plan to shoot for your target. So it all works together. So just like a lesson plan objective needs to match the assessment, the data used needs to match the goal. And again, just thinking back to that graphic, if your goal is the dropout rate, then obviously you would want to use attendance and other types of data that might be collected in your school on students. This is, and if I can't get it to play, maybe you guys, oh, yep, I can. So we're going to watch this video, and I hope it'll work.
1952, and the Air Force has a problem. Good pilots flying better planes. Res. It's 1952, and the Air Force has a problem. They've got good pilots flying better planes, but they're getting worse results, and they don't know why. And for a while, they blame the pilots. They even blame the technology. And they eventually got around to blaming the flight instructors. But it turned out that the problem was actually with the cockpit. Let me explain. Imagine you're a fighter pilot. You're operating a machine that in some cases can travel faster than the speed of sound, and where issues between success and failure, sometimes life and death, can be measured in split seconds. If you're a fighter pilot, you know that your performance depends fundamentally on the fit between you and your cockpit. Because after all, what good is the best technology in the world if you can't reach the critical instruments when you need them the most? But this presents a challenge for the Air Force, because obviously pilots are not the same size. So the issue is, how do you design one cockpit that can fit the most individuals? For a long time, it was assumed that you could do this by designing for the average pilot. That almost seems intuitively right. If you design something that fit for the average size person, wouldn't it fit most people? It seems right, but it's actually wrong. And 60 years ago, an Air Force researcher, Gilbert Daniels, proved to the world just how wrong this really is and what it was costing us. Here's how he did it. He studied over 4,000 pilots, and he measured them on 10 dimensions of size. And he asked a very simple question. How many of these pilots are average on all 10 dimensions? The assumption was that most of them would be. Do you know how many really were? 0. Gilbert Daniels proved there was no such thing as an average pilot. Instead, what he found was that every single pilot had what we call a jagged size profile, right? It means no one's at the same on every dimension. And this makes sense. Just because you're the tallest person doesn't mean you're the heaviest. Doesn't mean you have the broadest shoulders or the longest torso. But this is tricky because if every pilot has a jagged size profile and you design a cockpit on average, you've literally designed it for nobody. So the Air Force realized they had a problem. And their response was bold. They banned the average, meaning that moving forward, they refused to buy fighter jets where the cockpit was designed for an average-sized pilot. And instead, they demanded that the companies who built these planes design them to the edges of dimensions of size, meaning that rather than design for, say, the average height, they wanted a cockpit that could accommodate as close to the shortest pilot and the tallest pilot as the technology would allow. Now, the companies that made these planes, as you could imagine, weren't happy, right? They argued and lobbied, and they said it's going to be impossible, or at least impossibly expensive, to build a flexible cockpit. But once they realized that the Air Force wasn't going to budge, suddenly it was possible. And it turned out it wasn't that expensive. And in fact, they made great strides, leveraging simple solutions that we all take for granted in our everyday lives, like adjustable seats. And as a result, the Air Force not only improved the performance of the pilots that they already had, but they dramatically expanded their talent pool. And today, we have the most diverse pool of fighter pilots ever. But here's the thing. Many of our top pilots would have never fit in a cockpit designed on average. So most of us have never sat in the cockpit of a $150 million fighter jet, right? But we've all sat in the classroom. And I would argue I would argue that these are the cockpits of our economy. And I think we all know that we have some problems. We're spending more money than ever before, but we're getting worse results. Whether we're talking about declining test scores in math and science, or our dropout crisis, you probably know that we have over 1.2 million dropouts every single year in high school in this country. What you may not know is that at least 4% of those dropouts are known to be intellectually gifted. That means we're losing over 50,000 of our brightest minds every single year. So we know we have a problem. But do we know why? So far, we've been content to blame the students. We blame the teachers. We even blame the parents. But here's the thing. I think back to the Air Force example, and I can't help but wonder how much of this problem is just bad design.
Okay. So something to really think about there. What propels us to improve and to improve school improvement? So what conditions, and as you start working, what conditions are most important for your staff to successfully engage in data analysis? Are you able to identify the root cause of learner-centered problems for your underperforming students? And that's a big question. You know, what is causing it? So just think back to the video. Performance was low. They thought they were doing great. They were designing the cockpit of the plane to suit the average, and then they really found out that there was no such thing. What he said was, he summed it up really good. In their attempt to design a plane to meet the average, it met no average. It was designed for no one. So it's really important that whatever tools we use and whatever we do, it's the right thing for the job. So how tall is your temperature? Not the right tool for the job.
Our species is defined by the tools we use. That's how we got to the top of the food chain. And yet here we are doing things like this. It's embarrassing. When you use the wrong tool, you're not just making yourself look bad. You're making us all look bad. The Dodge Grand Caravan, the industry's most versatile cargo and passenger vehicle. It's the right tool for the job.
So it's real important for us to have that right tool. So what I'm fixing to do next is I'm going to slowly go through and add some image to what you're looking at, and you can take a guess what you think it might be. Somebody guess that might be an X-ray of someone's teeth. Ah, now it comes into view. This is what's underneath the iceberg. So we've got to dig in, got to figure out, that little bit of floating ice on top doesn't look too daunting. But when you look very carefully at what is underneath, then that tells a different story, and that's what we have to do. We have to worry about looking at that root cause. So I need the right tool for the job. So let's just say my glasses are broke. What tool am I going to use? Am I going to use one of those? Certainly not the hammer, not the chainsaw, not the measuring tape. Might use the screwdriver if I could. But it's real important to have the right tool for the right job. So from data-wise, hopefully you have your text. There's pages from the beginning up through page 13. It talks about Clark Elementary and Franklin High School and some things that they did. So hopefully you have had time to read that text. So I just want to highlight some things here, some lessons learned. Clark Elementary is a K-8 school. They cited some things that they felt like moved their school forward. Also, Franklin High School. Both of those schools cited leadership. Both of those schools cited establishing structure and differentiated support. And I don't mean differentiation in the classroom for their kids. It was differentiated support for the teachers. They both cited collaborative work. They both cited setting the tone for that improvement, and they both cited taking stock in data inventories. And what that means is, I think in Module 3, I'm asking you guys to do a data inventory of your school. What are your initiatives that you're doing? What are your teacher initiatives and learning initiatives? And then what types of data do you actually have access to? So those are the lessons learned from Clark K-8 and Franklin High School. The text obviously goes into great detail and gives you a lot of background information, but I wanted to just share out some things that were real important and some things that I think help drive our thinking about what school improvement really is. So this is the end of Module 2, and just want to tell you thank you. Thank you for taking this course, and I'm here for you in any way that I can. So, have a great day.